Welcome to Lukebook Money, built for Singapore. Today, the one number that quietly makes your net worth explode. There is a single number in wealth building that quietly changes everything. Below it, getting richer is a slow, painful grind, powered almost entirely by you. But the moment you cross it, something almost magical happens. Your net worth starts growing faster than you could ever save on your own. For most Singaporeans, that magic number is about $500,000. Below it, you push the snowball up the hill. Above it, the snowball starts rolling down on its own. Today, exactly why your net worth explodes after 500,000, and how to get there as fast as possible. But to understand the explosion, you first have to understand the grind that comes before it. Getting from 0 to 500,000 is, honestly, slow and painful. And there is a simple, brutal reason why. In the early years, the engine of compounding has almost nothing to work with. Think about it. 7% on $10,000 is just $700 a year. That's a rounding error. It won't change your life, and it certainly won't feel like an explosion. So in the beginning, almost every single dollar of your net worth has to come from one exhausting place. Your own savings. Not the market, not magic. You. You are the entire engine. You save, you sacrifice, you say no to things, and the graph still barely seems to move. Month after month, it feels like pushing a boulder that refuses to budge. This is exactly why the first 100,000 is famous for being the hardest money you will ever make. You do nearly all of the heavy lifting yourself, with almost no help from your money. It is slow, it is boring, and worst of all, it feels like it will never, ever end. And that feeling, that quiet despair, is the single most dangerous part of the entire journey. But then, somewhere around $500,000, a hidden line gets crossed. Quietly, without any fanfare. It is the single most important line in all of investing. It is the exact moment your money starts earning more money in a year than you can possibly save in a year. The two engines swap places. Here's the beautiful, simple math behind it. A diligent Singaporean saver might put away around $35,000 a year. That's roughly $3,000 a month, saved and invested. Now here is the magic. 7% on $500,000 is also about $35,000 a year. Suddenly, your portfolio is matching your entire year of saving, all on its own. Just sit with that for a second. Without you working a single extra hour, your money just did a full year's worth of saving, for you, while you slept. It is the day your money quietly gets a second job, and starts pulling its own weight right beside you. From here on, you are no longer carrying the whole load alone. So flip the whole picture. Below the line, you carry the money up the hill. Above the line, the money starts carrying you. That is the entire game, in one sentence. And every single dollar past that point, the balance tips a little further in your favor. Faster, and faster, and faster. The grind is finally over. Now you might be wondering, why 500,000? Online, you constantly hear that the magic number is 100,000. And 100,000 is a huge milestone. It's the first real proof that the system works, the end of the very hardest stretch. We made a whole episode just on it. But 100,000 at 7% only earns about 7,000 a year. That helps, but it doesn't yet outearn a serious saver. Your own hands are still the main engine. 500,000 is where, for a typical Singaporean income, the market finally matches and then overtakes you. That's why the real explosion starts there, and not at 100. So think of it this way. 100,000 is when you start to believe. 500,000 is when the math quietly takes over. Two different, equally important moments. This is the precise point where the famous compounding curve finally bends upward. Where the slow line turns into a steep one. Where the explosion actually begins. Up to 500,000, your wealth grows in a slow, almost straight line. Linear, predictable, and frankly a little boring. It plods along, one safe dollar at a time. But after the crossover, that line stops being straight and starts curving sharply upward. This is the hockey stick that everyone in finance talks about, and almost nobody is patient enough to actually reach. And there's a beautifully simple rule that shows you exactly how fast that back half moves. Take the number 72, and divide it by your return. At 7%, your invested money quietly doubles, all on its own, roughly every 10 years. Below 500,000, that doubling barely matters, because the amount being doubled is still small. Doubling $40,000 is nice, but it won't change your life. But once you're at 500,000, that exact same automatic doubling turns it into $1 million. Then the next one makes it 2. Then 4. Same rule, suddenly enormous. The doubling never changed. Your money was always trying to double. It just finally had a base big enough for that doubling to become genuinely life-changing. Watch the doubling times collapse. Getting from 0 to 500,000 might take a diligent saver around 10 long, gritty years of effort. But getting from 500,000 to a full million? With that exact same saving, only about 6 years. The second $500,000 arrives almost 40% faster than the first. Same effort. Same monthly saving. Wildly different result. The only thing that changed is that your money is now doing a bigger and bigger share of the work. And it just keeps accelerating from there. The second million comes faster than the first. The third comes faster than the second. The curve gets steeper every single year you stay in it. So this is the real explosion. Not a sudden lottery jackpot, but a quiet curve that bends a little harder every year, until one day it lifts off almost entirely without you. Let me make all of this painfully concrete, with one ordinary Singaporean saver. Meet Hui Ling. She's 28, earns a decent salary, and decides to save and invest $3,000 a month into a simple index fund. That's it. Nothing fancy, nothing clever. In year 1, she saves $36,000, and the market adds maybe $1,000 on top. She barely notices the growth. Honestly, it feels almost pointless. By year 5, she has pushed her way to around 200,000. The market is now chipping in a few thousand a year, but it's still mostly her, grinding it out month after month. And this is the exact moment that breaks most people. 5 years of relentless effort, and the curve still looks almost flat. Hui Ling is tempted, badly, to just give up. But she holds on. And around year 10, she finally does it. She crosses the line. $500,000, invested and quietly working for her. Now watch what happens to that same boring $3,000 a month. The market is suddenly adding about $35,000 a year, entirely by itself, on top of everything she saves. So her very next milestone arrives shockingly fast. By around year 16, just 6 years later, she rolls past $1 million. Look at that gap. The first 500,000 took her 10 long years. The second took barely 6. The curve is bending, right there in front of her eyes. And it does not stop there. By her early 50s, with that exact same $3,000 a month, her pot quietly rolls past $2 million, and just keeps climbing. Same person. Same salary. The same boring monthly habit, the entire way through. The only thing that changed was time, and the curve quietly doing its work in the background. Now picture the other version of Hui Ling. The one who quit at year 5, completely convinced it wasn't working. She walked away from her own $2 million future, one single foot from the water. And the beautiful part? Hui Ling never had to become a finance expert, or pick a single winning stock, or time a single market move. She just kept calmly feeding the machine. That is the entire promise of the crossover. Ordinary effort, applied with extraordinary patience, quietly compounding into something that looks, from the outside, like pure luck. Now, I can already hear the objection. $3,000 a month? Hui Ling must be on a huge salary. I can't possibly save that. And that is completely fair. 3,000 was just one example. The exact dollar figure genuinely doesn't matter. The principle scales perfectly to whatever you can actually do. Save 500 a month instead, and your crossover simply arrives at a lower number, and takes a bit longer to reach. But the curve, the bend, the explosion, every bit of it still happens. What actually matters is the savings rate, the share of your income you manage to keep. Someone earning less but saving 30% will quietly crush someone earning far more and saving nothing. And as your income grows over the years, you simply feed the machine a little more each time. Start with whatever you honestly can, today, and let the amount grow right alongside you. Because the worst possible move is to do nothing at all, simply because you can't yet do everything. A small amount, invested for a long time, still bends the curve. Which brings us to the cruelest, most expensive trap in all of wealth building. Almost everybody quits during the slow, flat first half. They save diligently for a few years, watch the graph crawl along, decide that this whole thing clearly isn't working, and they stop. And the heartbreaking part is they almost always quit right before the bend. They walk away just as the curve was about to start working for them, never seeing the reward that was a year or two away. It is like digging a well, getting tired, and walking away 1 foot from the water. Because the first 10 feet were nothing but dirt, they assume the next foot will be too. The people who actually get wealthy are rarely the smartest in the room. They are simply the ones who refuse to quit during the boring, discouraging part that scared everyone else away. So if your net worth feels completely stuck right now, please understand this. You are not failing. You are simply still standing in the flat part of the curve, doing the hardest work there is. So the real question becomes this. How do you get through that brutal grind, all the way to 500,000, as fast as humanly possible? And here's the key insight. Remember, below the line, the market barely helps you. Which means almost every lever that matters is sitting right there in your own two hands. Lever 1, and by far the most powerful. Your savings rate. The simple gap between what you earn and what you actually spend. Early on, saving 40% of your income will build wealth faster than any genius stock pick ever could. At this stage, how much you keep matters far more than what you invest it in. Lever 2. Grow your income, and then fiercely refuse to let your spending grow along with it. The trap most people fall into is earning more, and instantly spending more. A pay rise that goes straight into your investments, instead of into a nicer car or a fancier condo, is pure rocket fuel for that first 500,000. Lever 3. Actually invest the money. Cash sitting dead in your bank account, earning almost nothing, is quietly going backwards every year against inflation. And you do not need to be clever about it. A simple, low-cost global index fund quietly owning the whole world's companies does the job for almost everyone. Lever 4. Dodge the big wealth killers. In Singapore, that almost always means two things. The car, and the overstretched, lifestyle on display kind of living. One single avoided car can genuinely be the entire difference between reaching 500,000 by 40, or never quite reaching it at all. That is how heavy these decisions are here. And lever 5, the quiet multiplier sitting behind all the others. Time. Start now, today, even if the amount feels embarrassingly small. Because the grind to 500,000 is long, and there is no skipping it. The single best thing you can do is simply start it sooner, so the explosion arrives sooner. Now let's talk about the mistakes that quietly add years, sometimes whole decades, to your grind. Mistake 1. Trying to be clever, picking hot stocks or chasing the latest crypto, instead of just steadily buying a boring index fund. Most people who try this end up behind, not ahead. Mistake 2. Leaving your money in the bank because investing feels scary. That fear feels safe and responsible, but it quietly guarantees you never reach the crossover at all. Mistake 3. Lifestyle creep. Every time your pay rises, your spending quietly rises to swallow it, so the gap you actually invest never grows. You run faster and faster but stay in the exact same place. Mistake 4, and it's the big one in Singapore. Buying too much car, and too much house, far too early, and starving the very investment that was supposed to compound into your freedom. Mistake 5. Panic selling in a crash. Locking in a real loss, sitting out the recovery, and resetting your entire curve right back to flat. This one mistake has quietly wrecked more savers than any other. Every single one of these does the exact same quiet damage. It pushes your crossover further away, and traps you in the slow, grinding part for far longer than you ever actually needed. Now, 2 tactics that quietly turbocharge the whole grind. Let's start with the one nobody really likes to hear. There is a hard ceiling on how much you can cut from your spending. You can only trim a budget so far before there's nothing left. But there is no ceiling at all on how much you can earn. Early in the grind, raising your income is the single fastest way to widen the gap you invest. New skills, a job switch, a promotion, a side income. All of it pours straight into the machine. In Singapore, switching jobs every few years often beats patiently waiting for the loyal annual increment. The market quietly pays a real premium for the people willing to move. But, and this is everything, only if you actually bang the race. A bigger income that gets instantly spent buys you nothing. A bigger income that gets invested buys you years off the grind. Which brings us to the second tactic, and it might be the most powerful one of all. Automate the entire thing, so your own shaky willpower never even gets a vote. Set up an automatic transfer that moves your investment money out on the very day your salary lands, before you can see it, feel it, or even think about spending it. Pay yourself first, automatically, and the entire grind quietly runs itself in the background for years. No monthly decision to agonize over, no temptation, no willpower required at all. Earn more, bang the difference, and automate it so you simply can't talk yourself out of it. That one combination alone can shave years clean off your road to 500,000. And here's the good news. Singapore actually hands you a surprisingly powerful toolkit to build that first 500,000. Start with the one almost everybody overlooks. CPF. It is a forced, guaranteed wealth builder, quietly compounding away in the background of your entire working life, whether you think about it or not. Your CPF earns somewhere between 2.5% and 4%, completely risk-free. And you can voluntarily top it up, which also quietly slices down your income tax bill. For a huge number of Singaporeans, CPF alone quietly becomes a major chunk of that first 500,000, built up in the background without them ever feeling the pinch. Then there is SRS, the Supplementary Retirement Scheme, which lowers your income tax today while you invest that money for tomorrow. A genuine double win that too few people use. For the actual growth engine, a single low-cost global index fund gives you a slice of thousands of the world's best companies, in one click, for almost no fee. And keep a sensible cash flow in Singapore savings bonds or T-bills, so that when the market inevitably drops, you are never forced to sell your investments in a panic at the worst time. Put it all together and that's the whole machine. CPF and savings as the steady base, the index fund as the growth engine, and a cash flow for safety. Boring, repeatable, and quietly unstoppable. Let's put some real Singapore numbers on that machine, so it stops feeling abstract. For the growth engine, low-cost world trackers hold thousands of companies for a fee of around 0.2% a year. Cheap, simple, and instantly diversified across the planet. On CPF, your special account compounds at a guaranteed 4%, and voluntary top-ups can shave thousands of dollars off your income tax bill every single year. On SRS, you can contribute over $15,000 a year, lowering your taxable income today, then invest that money for decades of growth. And for the safe cash flow, Singapore savings bonds and T-bills have recently paid in the low single-digit %, fully government-backed, with absolutely zero drama. Stack all of those together, consistently, for a decade, and 500,000 quietly stops being a fantasy. It becomes something much closer to simple arithmetic. So what does $500,000 actually mean, here, in Singapore? In net worth terms, It puts you somewhere around the top quarter to top third of households. Comfortably above the average Singaporean, but honestly, nowhere close to rich. But here is the crucial Singapore catch, and it trips up almost everyone. Not all 500,000s are created equal. 500,000 locked inside the flat you actually live in does not compound, and it does not pay you a single cent you can spend. It just sits there, looking good on paper. The explosion only ever happens on the part of your net worth that is genuinely invested and working. The liquid part. The shares, the funds, the money that can actually compound. So your real target was never just 500,000 in total net worth. It is 500,000 that is actually invested, and free to grow. That is the number that detonates. And once that invested 500,000 is finally working for you, here is the future it quietly unlocks. First, the snowball reaches 1 million far faster than you ever dared to expect. Then 2 million. Then it just keeps stretching out beyond that, almost on its own. Second, at some point those investment returns can quietly cover your entire cost of living. The rent, the food, the bills, all paid by your money, not your job. That is financial independence. A rough rule of thumb. Once your invested pot is about 25 times your yearly spending, work quietly shifts from a necessity into a choice. You keep working because you want to, not because you must. And here is the wildest part of all. By then, you barely have to do anything to reach the finish line. The math just runs, quietly, in the background, while you go and live your life. Which means that whole brutal grind to 500,000 was never really about the money. It was you, quietly building a machine that would one day finish the entire job for you. But what if, right now, you feel like you've already left it far too late? Maybe you're 40, or 50, with far less saved than you'd hoped, watching younger people start decades ahead of you. It is so easy to feel like the explosion will simply never reach you in time. But here's the reframe. The best time to start was years ago, yes, and you can't change that now. The second best time, the only one that actually exists, is right now, today. And starting late, with a higher income, is its own quiet kind of advantage. A 40-year-old who saves aggressively can reach the crossover faster than a broke 20-year-old ever could. And remember, in Singapore your CPF has quietly been building this entire time, whether you were paying attention to it or not. You may be far closer to that line than you think. The curve genuinely does not care how old you are when you start it. It only cares that you start, and that you refuse to stop. So start today, at absolutely any age. And just to hammer home why starting today matters so much, look at two friends. Both will save the exact same 3,000 a month, into the same index fund, earning the same returns. The one and only difference between them is when they begin. Amir starts at 25. His friend Ben keeps meaning to begin, keeps putting it off, and only really starts at 35. Just 10 years apart. By the time they are both 60, Amir doesn't simply have 10 years more savings than Ben. He has roughly double the entire portfolio. Sometimes even more than double. How is that possible? Because Amir's extra 10 years happened at the very start, where they had the longest possible time to compound. Those early dollars did the hardest work of his entire life. So Ben didn't really lose 10 years of contributions. He lost 10 years of compounding, which is a vastly more expensive thing to lose. Which is exactly why the most valuable, and the most perishable, asset you will ever own isn't money at all. It is the time you still have left to let that money grow. Which means the hardest part of this entire journey was never the math. The math is simple. The hardest part is the patience. You have to keep saving and investing through years where it genuinely feels like absolutely nothing is happening. Where the graph crawls and your friends seem to be enjoying life far more than you. You have to trust an exponential curve, on faith, while you are still standing in its flat, boring, discouraging beginning, with no proof yet that it will ever bend. And you have to stop endlessly comparing yourself to the people who simply started this 10 years before you did. Their head start is not your failure. It's just earlier math. Because the only thing standing between you and the explosion is the unglamorous discipline to not stop. That, in the end, is the whole secret. Not brilliance. Just persistence. And on that long road to 500,000, you will absolutely live through market crashes. Plural. So plan for them now, while you're calm. At some point, you will watch your hard-won portfolio fall 20, 30, even 40%. Years of patient saving, seemingly wiped out in a matter of weeks. It will feel genuinely sickening. And in that exact moment, every instinct in your body will be screaming at you to sell, to stop the pain, to protect whatever is left. That instinct is the single biggest wealth killer there is. Because here is the truth almost nobody manages to internalize. A crash is not your money disappearing. It is the entire world going on sale, at the exact moment you still have a paycheck to go shopping with. The savers who get genuinely rich don't flinch in a crash. They keep calmly buying, all the way down. And those cheap shares, bought in the middle of the panic, become the biggest winners of the next decade. So decide it right now, today, long before the storm arrives. You will not sell. A crash is not the end of your plan. For a patient saver, it is quite possibly the best thing that can happen to it. One last practical trick to survive the long, flat grind. Make the invisible progress visible. The grind is so discouraging partly because you simply can't feel it happening. So track your net worth, once a month, in a simple spreadsheet. Watch the number, not your feelings. Then set small milestones, and genuinely celebrate every one. Your first 10,000. Your first 50. Your first 100. Each one is real, hard-won proof that the machine is actually working. These little markers are what carry you across the boring years. They quietly turn an invisible, decade-long slog into a series of small, winnable, satisfying little games. Because the saver who actually reaches the crossover is rarely the one with the most motivation. Motivation always fades. It's the one who builds systems that keep working long after the motivation is gone. Track it, celebrate it, automate it, and the whole grind quietly stops being a test of willpower, and becomes something you can almost boringly, almost inevitably, just win. Now, the honest caveats, because this channel always gives you both sides of the story. That 7% return is a long-term historical average, not a promise. Some years the market falls, and falls hard. Your curve will be bumpy, not a smooth line, and that's completely normal. The curve bends upward over decades, not over months. This is a slow, patient, deeply unsexy game, and anyone promising you the explosion in 2 years is selling you something. And 500,000 is a rough crossover, not a magic switch. Save more aggressively, and your line gets crossed sooner. Save less, and it simply comes later. The principle holds, the exact number is yours. And of course, none of this is financial advice. It is just the simple, powerful math behind why patient, boring wealth building actually works at all. And finally, the part that actually matters most. What is all of this grind even for? Because the explosion was never really about the number on the screen. A few $1 million sitting in an account is just digits. What those digits actually buy is something far more human. It buys choices. The choice to walk away from a job that's slowly crushing you. The choice to take the risk, start the thing, say the brave and necessary no. It buys time. The single most finite thing you own. Time with your kids while they're still small, time for your health, time you are no longer forced to sell to a desk. And it buys a quiet, deeply unglamorous kind of peace. The peace of simply knowing that a job loss, an emergency, or a bad month is no longer something that can break you. That, in the end, is the real explosion. Not the money quietly getting bigger, but your life, quietly, getting freer. So let's bring the whole thing home. Your net worth really does explode after $500,000. But that explosion sits patiently on the far side of a long, slow, deeply boring grind. There is no shortcut around it. Below the line, you carry the money. Above the line, the money carries you. Your one and only job is to grit your teeth and reach that line. So save hard, invest simply, dodge the big Singapore traps, and above all, refuse to quit during the flat, discouraging years when it feels like none of it is working. The best time to start that grind was probably 10 years ago. But the second best time, by far, is today. Get yourself to 500,000, and then let the math take it from there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you, somewhere up that curve, in the next one. Thanks for watching. If this made building wealth in Singapore a little clearer, give it a like and subscribe to Lukebook so you don't miss the next episode. See you in the next one.